Hello, you wonderful humans. Welcome to the Liberated Podcast. Hello, you wonderful humans. Welcome to another episode of the Liberated Woman podcast. Today, you are with me. I don't have a guest, it's a solo podcast episode, and it is something that is on my heart to speak about. I am talking about an experience of mine, which I am sure will resonate with a lot of you. So, what am I talking about today? I am talking about the way a strong mindset can make us fumble the bag. If you don't know what fumble the bag means, it's a young people slang. It's the young people speak. I don't know if it's Gen Z or what, but it is the phenomenon of missing out on an opportunity. And I want to speak to this specifically to type A women, very ambitious, pride themselves on keeping their word, who like to be consistent, like to be committed. When we devote ourselves to things, we really devote ourselves to things. And sometimes it can make us hold on when we are supposed to let go. So, my story. During the process of writing my book, Women Who Work Too Much, Break Free from Toxic Productivity and Find Your Joy, plug. During the process of writing this book last year, I was doing lots of research and reading all sorts of things about women and work. And I was reading lots of research and theories, etc. Because whilst I wanted my book to speak to my experience and also share some of the experiences of the women I come across in my life and in my work, I wanted to make sure that it was also looking at the evidence we have, like empirical evidence, sorry, and also qualitative and quantitative research. Basically, research that has been done with numerous women and has been tested and has been analyzed, etc. I wanted to make sure that I had a strong evidential base for the things I was sharing in my book, partly just the way I am, and also after being a social worker for 16 years nearly, it was drilled into us all the time that we needed to have an evidence base for what we were sharing. Not because our own experience isn't valuable, but when we are sharing things publicly and when we are sharing information in a way that is supposed to help people make decisions, help people grow and learn and develop, it needs to be back like our opinion is valid and it counts, and we also need to back up our opinion with some experience. Now, there's a part of my brain right now that's saying that's really colonial, because it is quite colonial. And there's another part of my brain that is saying that actually we can't just go around saying what we think without testing it. So do with that as you will. But back to my story. So, writing my book, reading all the things I was reading, observing what I was observing, etc., it helped me to solidify my ideas, my beliefs, my values, and all of that stuff. And unlike when we write newsletters or blog posts or social media content, writing a book means that all of your, well, depending on the type of book you're writing, but for me, it meant that all of my ideas that I usually shared a little bit in this blog post, a little bit in this newsletter, bits and bobs in this social media content, it all came together to form a body of work. So, writing the book, write the chapter by chapter writing, and then working on the edits, looking at the book together as a whole, reading it, rereading it, and then having the opportunity to read it again as I read it for my audiobook. It meant that all of my beliefs, my values, my strengths, my challenges, all of that were in one solid place. I wasn't looking at things piecemeal. I was able to look at things holistically. And that experience radicalized me. I can't unknow what I know. I can't unlearn what I've learnt. I cannot unexperience what I've experienced. So it means that my journey of writing the book the person I had to become to write the book, and the things I had to let go of in order to have the space to think, to contemplate, to daydream, to test and experiment, meant that I was also thinking, daydreaming, testing, and experimenting myself, the work I do, who I work with, how I show up in this world. And it became very clear to me that the type of person I work with, especially in a space that's quite intimate, where there's a lot of contact with me, I'm sharing, I'm coaching, I'm challenging, I'm mentoring, I'm supporting, etc., that has evolved because I have evolved. And for me, as a person who has tendencies, the tendency to please, somebody who is very relational, and if I don't catch myself, that relational nature can become people pleasing. I've had to reckon with the fact that I need to let go of a lot of stuff that has been really good for me personally and professionally, and has been really good for the people I've had the blessing, the opportunity to work with. So, an example is in 2020, I had the idea for my Sovereign Group Coaching Program, and it was born out of a program I ran in 2019. And the program in 2019 was called The Joyful Woman. It was a 12-week program because that's what was happening mainly in the coaching space. I'm not saying that it wasn't happening, but I was seeing very few programs that were 6 months to a year long. And as I was creating The Joyful Woman, I felt that it needed to be longer, tapping into my social work experience and understanding what it took to support people who had intergenerational difficulties, understanding what it took to support them to make change, and thinking about the common issues that were coming up for the women I work with and the woman I created the program for. I kind of knew that it needed to be a 12-month program, but I felt like I didn't have the right to create the program because I'm somebody who has a deep program about following the rules. Like, I don't follow the rules, I'm non-linear, I don't do things quote unquote properly. And I wanted to do a good job. So I defied myself and decided to go along with what I saw in the coaching industry. And don't get me wrong, the Joyful Woman program was great. Women in that program I've gone on to work with time and time again. I got great feedback, and that feedback supported me in having the courage to follow my intuition and evolve the Joyful Woman program into the Sovereign Group Coaching Program, which was my flagship offer. It really put my business on the map. I decided I was going to create it in such a way that the that one program, Sovereign, would be equal to my last social work salary, which was more than, because I firmly believe in having one solid, beautiful foundational offer in your product ecosystem. I refer to these offers as being like the soil of your ecosystem that's able to nurture and nourish everything else, so that you're creating from that stable foundation instead of creating random different offers, so that it all comes from this solid base. As I like to put it, instead of being scattered and shattered, making all of these different things, you are purposeful and aligned because you're drawing on that foundational offer to create different things. So, thinking about an ecosystem, there are many things in the ecosystem that grow up from the earth. It's a similar type of vibe. And that program, it is a very deep and transformative program. Women have a space to be in a way they cannot be in other places. So, one of the ways it was described is that this is the only place I can be a hot ass mess and also be a leader all at the same time. And that program was fantastic. It was really, really good. And it was great at that time. Because of the nature of the program and what I was writing, I knew I couldn't run the program and write my book at the same time. So I decided to pause the Sovereign program so that I could focus on my book. And in the background, I have been upgrading and updating my Sovereign program. But something niggly was preventing me from sharing it with people and inviting people to join. And over time, what I realized is that the Sovereign program was great at the time, but bearing in mind my evolution and uh, the what that evolution has facilitated in terms of the women I work with, the Sovereign program is not part of this current leg of the journey. That chapter is over. That chapter is closed. And because I know it's a good program, I'm committed to it. And because my mindset is strong, I can override my intuition and I can override, you know, my body signals and plow on. I was really trying to move forward with this sovereign program. And what I realized is that that strong mindset meant that I was focusing on what was good, which means I've been fumbling the bag and preventing myself to grow into, to step up into my greatness, the next level of growth, expansion, etc. So I'm going to read a quote by Robert Brault. Please forgive me if I'm saying his name incorrectly. And the quote is: "We are kept from our goal not by obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal. Sovereign and the work I have been doing previously, which has been good, now has become a lesser goal that is preventing me from accessing the next level of expansion." It's meant that I've been holding on to something that I should have let go of, which has contributed to a fumbling of the bag. So I want to invite you to think about it for yourself and to put some more kind of flesh on the bone. I want to ask you if you've ever felt like a gnawing frustration when things are going well, but you feel like you're constantly pushing, and you're pushing because the passion has fizzled out. Instead of operating powerfully, you're now forcing. When we experience that, we can often think, oh, maybe it's because I'm shattered. Maybe it's because burnout is on the horizon. But I think, particularly with us high functioning type A people, it's more than likely a sign that you have outgrown your current level. Now, us type A type women, we like the idea of being consistent, even though consistency is one of my trigger words. We like to honor our word. We like to do all the mindset and all the hacks and tips and all of this kind of stuff to be able to overcome. We love that journey of overcoming and pushing through. But sometimes what we are pushing through is our deep, innate wisdom, and it's keeping us stuck when that wisdom is saying, take a beat, reassess, reassess. It could be time to let go. So, in this context, fumbling the bag, it's not about dropping the ball or failing. It's not about lacking ambition and drive. In fact, it's the opposite. Fumbling the bag is when we unintentionally hold on to what no longer serves us. At one point, it served us really well, but now it's actually holding us back. It can look like holding on to the job that no longer lights you up, where you start to get the Sunday scaries and every task feels like a chore. It could be like me, trying to revamp and hold on to a program that is no longer supporting you being in your zone of genius. It's not even in your zone of excellence anymore. You're having to force yourself instead of operating in power. It can look like holding on to the same kind of client group when actually you've evolved and therefore so has the type of person you work with in your service based business. It could be continuing to create the same type of products you always have when you damn well know it's time to let that go and do something bigger, bolder. It's so easy to hold on because we've got this notion of that is what's being committed, when actually, even though it doesn't make sense, it is the time we need to let go. We automatically think, if I let go of that, how am I going to have the income? How am I going to have the impact, etc.? When actually, what you are doing is holding on to what is familiar, clinging on to habits and patterns because change feels scary. We do that in relationships as well, romantic and also platonic. We're so scared of the unknown, we start to back fear instead of faith and create what appear to be credible reasons for holding on. For people who are, I know I keep banging on about the type A thing, but we can be really controlling because it gives us a false sense of agency. We've built our identities around doing, around achieving, around controlling, being dependable, the person that goes the extra mile, the person that people can rely on. Don't worry, she can do it. She'll volunteer. It doesn't matter if she has to stay up all night. She'll do it. She can pull it out the bag. Our identities become based on doing, doing, doing. I've written a book called Women Who Work Too Much for a reason. I know this story. I'm obsessed with the topic of toxic productivity because I know this story. I say that type A in type that A in type A often stands for anxiety. And when we can learn to let go and create space and not ram out that space with new tasks, give ourselves that time for ideation, for daydreaming, for taking care of ourselves, for doing the things that support us to become more creative. It makes all the difference. I often say that anxiety is actually creativity that's been stifled because instead of creating, we're controlling. Now, allowing ourselves that space and that grace to grow and evolve, doing the work we need to do so that we can make peace with uncertainty and understand that this next level of growth cannot be linear. We then allow ourselves to evolve into that next level of leadership. As strong as and as ambitious we are, a lot of the drive comes from pleasing behavior. Our capacity to do, our ability to push through and override tiredness and not let people down and be the best person we can be for our clients and all of that kind of stuff, that's people pleasing. It might not feel like it, but it is actually pleasing behavior. And when we step into that next level of leadership, we need to be able to set boundaries, even when it's uncomfortable. And knowing that we're setting boundaries for ourselves, not other people. When we try to set boundaries for other people, we are externalizing what we need to internalize. We are making rules for other people instead of honoring what we need to do, who we need to be for ourselves. When we step into that level of leadership and we have the boundaries we need to have to support our majesty, to support how resplendent we are, we then allow ourselves to become a creator who prioritizes their own ideas and expressions over consuming the work, the energy, and all of that jazz from other people. We can apply the 80-20 rule and we can be like, cool, yes, I've done a whole lot of learning. I need to be super duper discerning about the learning I'm doing now. And trust and believe, social media scrolling is learning. When you become discerning about your learning and you choose to apply the 80/20 rule, so you choose to become a creator 80% of the time and 20% of the time you're consuming, and you know that that 20% influences what you create, you become so much more discerning about what you take in. And for a lot of us that are chronically online, like I have been chronically online, and I've downloaded, this is not an ad, they're not paying me, I've paid for it. There's an app called Opal, which I have purchased, which limits my access to social media. So when I'm accessing social media, I have to be so discerning about what I'm consuming, because once that app shuts down, unless I delete it and put it back in again and change the settings, which is a real like mission to do, like I'd have serious problems if I was doing that, it forces to me to be really discerning. Because in the time I allow myself to access social media with this app, I've got to create my content, put it out there, engage with people that have engaged in my content, and go. So if I spend too much time consuming, it means that I'm not going to have enough time for creation, which for me looks like I've had to mute. There are lots of people I love and adore, but I've had to mute them on my social media timelines so I don't fall into consuming their content. And what I do is, from this place of discernment, I actually actively go and seek them and their content, because I want to read their content and I want to support them, but I don't want it to come at the cost of my creativity. Because again, I'll say it, creativity that is suppressed, creativity that is stifled, becomes anxiety. When we know that this next level of leadership requires us to create from our highest vision, from our highest truth, from the deepest vision, from the deepest truth, we have to start to say no to good opportunities to make space for great ones. And that can be really challenging. In the last few weeks, I've had some really tempting offers, and I could do them. I could absolutely expand and do them. But what will it cost? Is the juice I will get from it worth the squeeze? If I didn't want to look like I'm nice, if I didn't want to appease the person that had asked me, what would my choice be? Is saying yes taking me closer to my goal, or is it a lesser goal that's keeping me away from my goal? These opportunities have been good, but the amount of time and energy they would require is too much for what I will be gaining. So they've had to be a no. And they're for things that would be great to have that logo on my website and to say, I've done this thing. But it's no longer in my great category. I've had to really lean in and trust my intuition, even though it doesn't make logical sense. And there's a part of me that's like, Tams, that's a lot of money you're leaving on the table. But I trust and I know that it's about me growing my capacity to embrace this discomfort of growth, knowing that on the other side is more alignment, more fulfillment, no, more satisfaction, more satiation. And, saying yes to these good things would be me fumbling the bag. It might not seem like it at the time, but I know that it will cost. So, how do we avoid fumbling our bag in this way? How do we recognize when our strong mindset is actually holding us back? So, one of the first things, as a somatic coach who deeply knows that our bodies are infinitely wise, is to start paying attention to your body. That exhaustion that you're feeling is not a sign of weakness, it's a call for rest. That sinusitis, that sore throat that keeps coming, all of those inflammation, laryngitis, bronchitis, all of that, the irritation, the rolling your eyes all the time, being frustrated with your clients. It's your body's signals asking you to pay attention before it has to force you to stop with illness. If you've read my book, you would have read about my experience of that in the introduction. You've got to also create healthy boundaries. Saying no isn't selfish. It doesn't mean you're not committed. It doesn't mean that you're selfish. It's actual self-preservation. It puts you in a state that rather than not pouring from an empty cup, you don't let the cup get empty in the first place so that you're able to pour from the overflow. It means that your energy is protected like the valuable source it is. Without energy, we don't have anything. Healthy boundaries prevents you from taking on other people's boundaries as your own. Other people's issues as your own. It means that you're not carrying around the weight of the last coaching session you just did. It means that you're not carrying the weight when you see somebody struggling. It means that you can see real challenge taking place in the world and you can have a bit of distance between it and you so that you are able to function rather than be consumed by it. It means that you hold yourself to a higher standard for yourself. You advocate for yourself. You're operating in agency. I was watching a podcast with Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and he talked about empathy is not the same as taking responsibility for other people. Lots of us who work with other humans and are really passionate about the work we do, sometimes that line of empathy can become blurred and it can be us taking responsibility for other people. Empathy says, I'm going to sit beside you. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to offer you support, not I'm going to jump inside your experience and try to fix you and take responsibility for it. It also looks like making rest a regular practice. And I say a practice because for all of us, especially those of us that have been conditioned to place our worth, our value on how much we can do and how often and how we do it for other people, resting can feel unsafe. It can play into all sorts of less programming and narratives about being lazy, about not being determined, about not being driven. So again, I'll mention my book. If you haven't got it already, I highly recommend you do. I talk about this at length in my book, and I share rest practices. And in one of the chapters, I can't remember which now, I share a rest practice. I'm sure it's in the Know Your Bandwidth chapter, because it is a practice. And those of us that are very driven can think rest just means sitting around doing nothing. Well, no, it doesn't. There are different types of rest. And in my book, I also refer to and break down Dr. Saundra Dalton Smith's 7 types of rest. So do check that out. I have written, Us Ambitious Driven Women. My book, I wrote it as a love letter to your nervous system. Something else I recommend is challenging your beliefs. If you have been programmed to believe more is always better, I want you to spend some time journaling on what does enough look like for you. How can you prioritize fulfillment over exhaustion? Now, the way women who identify with this operate, our enough is bountiful. We've just been conditioned to never ever be satisfied. In my book, I refer to us striving but never arriving, or striving but never realizing, something like that. Again, if more is always better, what does enough look like for you? And how can you prioritize fulfillment? Initially, I said over exhaustion, but I'm going to change that. How can you prioritize fulfillment over perfection? These steps can help you to tune into your body and repair the rupture that has been created in the trust you have for your body. Because a lot of us have been conditioned to, like, you can't trust your body. If your body says you're tired, you're not really tired, you're just lazy. If your body says this is overwhelming, you're not really overwhelmed, you need a better plan. It means that you're not being organized, you're not managing your time well. Occasionally it is poor time management, but most of the time it's bloody overwhelm, and we need to listen to that. So these steps I've shared, these 4 steps, will help you to build that trust, that self-trust again, to tune into your intuition and recognize when it's time for a change. You know that saying, a change is as good as a rest? And I want you to start to practice this so that you can recognize when it's time for a change before you fumble the bag by staying stuck in a situation you've outgrown. I'm recording this episode on Sunday, the 14th of July. My fumble has cost me about 3 months because I've been sitting trying to force myself to make this program fit and work, talking about my sovereign program that I was referring to at the beginning, when actually that program has served its purpose. It's time for something else. Now, I'm not shaming myself for that, unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately. Let me just say that's part of my process. And I have now created an alternative, well, not an alternative. I have now been able to take the parts of sovereign I want to bring forward and marry that with my own growth, my evolution, the things I've learned from the women I've worked with since I have been a coach, my experience as a social worker, and also other women I've been working with. And I've been able to create a new program, which is chef's kissable. I am so galvanized by it. I am so in love with it. I really freaking believe in it. I cannot wait to start sharing it with you all because it is designed for the woman I'm speaking to in this podcast. Because when we stop fumbling the bag, we can start to leverage our skills and our experience so we are able to do less, be more, create more, and earn more from a place of sovereignty. So I am going to leave that here. If you do some journaling around that final journal prompt, if more is always better, what does enough look like for you? How can you prioritize fulfillment over perfection? Please do let me know, whether it's on a social media platform or commenting wherever you're listening to this podcast episode. I would love to hear from you. Please do rate and review my podcast. Your ratings, your reviews are very, very important. The algorithms love that stuff, and then they share this podcast with more people, and I want it to reach far and wide. If you share on social media, please do tag me. I'm at Tamu Thomas on most social media platforms. I'm definitely as that on Instagram and LinkedIn. So please do tag me there. And for now, I am going to leave you to contemplate what I have shared and let us feel bold enough, courageous enough to trust that it is not just safe, but it is imperative for us to let go of the good and make way for the great. Take care, dear ones.